Hello, everybody. Beau Billington. Welcome back to another episode of the Free Agent Podcast. I'm super stoked to have Ha Nguyen. So much for joining.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Beau.
Yeah, so some context. Ha and I met a few weeks ago, had a great conversation about all things related to VC, fractional work, etc. You're currently a fractional COO advisor at your own firm, Next Step Advisory. Prior, you were a seasoned startup operator, 16 years in leadership roles, moving into the VC side of the world, and now a fractional COO for hire. She's led companies like Swimply, invested in purpose-driven startups as a founding partner at Spiro Ventures, and now helps founders scale through her consultancy. She also serves on the board of Women in Product, a 30,000 member nonprofit, and co-founded the Product Leader Summit, which you recently just hosted for the first time live in 4 years. Invite-only gathering of top founders and product leaders, passionate about building people-first cultures, supporting founders, and creating products customers love. Thanks for joining. That was a mouthful.
Yeah, thanks, Beau. Well, you were supposed to have said that we've known each other since childhood,
It's true.
but
Yeah. Yeah. Apologies there. But I feel like I've known you for a long time.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So
Kindred
talk to
spirit.
me about kind of your journey, right? So spending, 16 plus years in leadership, becoming a VC, and now you're actually a fractional COO. So that's quite the career move. And what kind of inspired those big shifts along the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, yeah, I'll start from the beginning. I actually grew up in a rural town in Pennsylvania, and then ended up going to school and consulting after school. Didn't like consulting back then. This was in the 90s, went to business school, thought I would be a brand manager, but then in the late 90s, I saw that there was something called the internet that was just starting to take shape, and I wanted to be part of the dot-com boom.
Yeah.
So I immediately moved to California the Monday after graduating from school, a business school, and joined eBay when it was about 200 people in HQ. And I was a what you call a product manager before product management was a real thing. So I was one of the first 6 PMs that they hired. Worked on all of the iconic features at eBay, all of the buy it now features, eBay stores, PayPal integration, checkout and payments, my eBay, seller features, you name it. It was such a great place to be because it was mission driven,
Hmm.
hyper growth company, and just learned a ton. Was part of an incredible network of people. And in fact, tonight I am going to eBay's 30th birthday party slash alumni reunion
Oh,
for
wow.
those who worked under Meg Whitman in that era. So I'm really excited about reconnecting with the network from 25 years ago. After eBay, I ended up taking on four different VP product roles at Series A through Series C venture-backed startups. And then I moved into venture capital for about 5 years, first as an EIR, executive in residence, then an operating partner, then an investment partner.
Mhm.
I started a fund with an old co boss slash colleague. It was called Spiro Ventures, $100 million fund. We invested in what we called the things that make life worth living across well-being, work and purpose, human
Yeah.
connection. During the pandemic, I got a little bit burnt out of venture. I missed my operating roots. I ended up taking on a COO role at a hyper-growth marketplace startup that had hit lightning in a bottle during the pandemic and blew up like crazy. And that was a wild ride. It was a career highlight. Leaving that startup after a couple of years, and upon reflection, I kind of realized that now that I'm 52, yeah, even though I might not look it,
Do not look it.
thank you. That's very kind of you to say. But I just don't think that I wanted to just go all in on any one company anymore. I really, really wanted to continue to support founders. I'm really good at helping them build companies from the ground up. But instead of just picking one and joining one, in this fractional world, I could actually work with a few different ones who are mission driven, values aligned,
Sure.
and working on products I believe in, but supporting a few, not just one. So that's kind of what I've been doing as the main thing that I do. But I guess
Sure.
if I were to describe myself now, I would say that I'm building a portfolio career. And we
Yeah.
could talk about what that looks like, but it's, broader than just only doing client work.
No, for sure. And so at Ventures, as you mentioned, investing in purpose-driven startups, and now you're kind of doing your own things as a fractional COO. How does it feel to have sat on both sides of the table, right? I mean, is that
Yeah.
kind of your superpower, the fact that you've literally sat in the shoes, of both the VC and kind of the founding team with growth?
Yeah, I would say when I was in VC, it was very elusive to me, right? I mean, as you know, although I got invited to board meetings and and participated in those board meetings, I just had no idea about the other side. Learned so much about like what VCs are looking for when they back these companies, right? I mean, they'll talk to 100 founders and back less than 1% of those founders. And so I think it made me a lot savvier as an executive, especially at Swimply, where I helped the founders raise 2 rounds of capital. I knew exactly what the VCs were looking for, how to tell the right story, etc. And it really helps me now in the work that I do, because sometimes with founders, I'm helping them with strategy and operations and helping them build and grow their businesses. But then I can also help them raise money,
Right.
introduce them to VCs, etc. Is it different? Yes, it's very different, right? VCs, you're not building, you're advising, consulting, and they may not listen to you as a founder. I do find myself right now in the shoes of what I would say being a CEO whisperer, which is they don't need to talk to me, right? Like
Right.
they could fire me at any moment. So I have to really build that deep trust and
Sure.
credibility fast with founders for them to not only take my advice but keep me on for the long term. And all of the founders I work with, I've been working with for many many years now,
Right.
and then just be able to sort of share with them like what
Yeah.
I've learned in my 25 years of operating companies and being on the other side of
No,
the
I can
table.
see it being a total competitive advantage for a company that's looking to maybe their first round, second round, et cetera. The fact that you sit on the other side of the table, you know what they're looking for.
Hmm.
In that vein, what are some of the most common challenges that you see from founders when they engage you as a fractional COO? Is it the funding component? Is it the shiny object syndrome? You kind of help ground them, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of different things. But one thing that I see is that transition from founder to CEO is very, very hard for a lot of the founders I work with, right? So, when you're a founder, you do a lot of, you wear a lot of the roles yourself, you roll up your sleeves, you get things done. You understand the business so deeply, you understand the customer so deeply.
Mhm.
But the role of a CEO is a completely different role.
Right.
And sometimes what I see is that founders have a hard time making that transition, either because they're still in the mindset of like, I know the answers. I got to do everything myself, and I'm going to tell these executives with these fancy titles and fancy salaries like what to do, or they don't know how to hold their executives accountable, right? Like like shift into vision and strategy and
Right.
communications and let their executives, figure out the right plan, get it done, but then really hold them accountable if they can't drive to the numbers.
Mhm.
Some of the founders I've worked with, like, too quick to like let executives go, and then others,
Yes.
they take too long to figure it out.
Probably the
So
latter being the bigger issue, right? But then also too, you do need to give, the former, you need to give people enough time to kind of, get up to speed and become part of the fabric of the company. But I see that a lot as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go on and on, but yeah, I think in the former, you need some time, but I think you also have to approach it delicately, right? Because
Yeah.
it shapes the culture and like, and the message that you're sending to folks if you have too many execs that you're letting go in succession or you're not handling it in the proper way.
Yeah, it's super interesting too. So, we see that a lot as well. Companies that we work with, oftentimes founder led, founder run, they get the company to a certain size. They realize they're out over their skis, or maybe they're getting some suggestions from the VC or the PE, whomever, that it's time to bring somebody else in. But oftentimes they do have a really tough time kind of relinquishing that control and allowing
Hmm.
the fractional exec or just the exec in general to do their job. So super interesting that that's kind of a common theme that you see when you're doing, when you're engaged in a fractional COO role.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say um, No, I would say that I see it in terms of how they're managing the executives. I have a very unique style within my sort of fractional engagements, in that, like, look, if they aren't going to trust me, or they bring, yeah, it is a mutual decision, right? Of like, do I even want to work with this founder, right? And so if I can't get to trust and credibility fast enough, where you know, they're pulling me in, to the work, or also just like, I mean, I mentioned CEO whisperer for a reason, right? It's like I want to have that level of trust with the CEO where, if I say something, they will deeply listen and take it into consideration and take action on it. Those are the CEOs that I want to work with. And if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. But I feel like I'm in this unique position where I get to be picky and choosy about who I work with as well.
Yeah,
You know.
it's a good segue into kind of the comment you mentioned about portfolio career. Most of the folks that we work with work anywhere from, one, but generally two to four opportunities at any given time, with a pretty equitable distribution across that, right? Just to kind of hedge on risk a little bit. But what does
Mm.
portfolio mean to you? And what are some best
Yeah.
practices you've not only seen, but maybe that you implement yourself?
Yeah, well, I would say portfolio career can and should span more than just client work. So it's about figuring out what you're passionate about, working on projects that fall in your passion areas, and then hopefully that you can make good money doing it. So, as an example, for my portfolio career, so I have my client work, which is still about 90% of the revenue that I take on. I also am on some boards. I also do the occasional executive search, which I think I mentioned to you last time, Beau, because that's fun. That allows me to tap into my network to help these founders like find great people. But then I also will do a lot of like reading, writing, speaking. I have a referral network. And then on the side, my husband and I have angel investments and real estate investments. So it's a pretty diversified portfolio. And so that's why it's called portfolio career. So like, I guess I no longer believe in like just being all in one company. That's all you work on. And that is work. That is, it defines your identity. Like my identity now is a lot of different things: fractional COO, executive, recruiter, board member,
That-
you
That's
know, uh, community builder. So,
Yeah, no, that's a super interesting take though on the portfolio career not being just about kind of the work you do, but kind of the lifestyle that you have as well. Because I typically look at it in a bit of a vacuum where it's like it's the work you're doing and it doesn't have anything to do with everyday, Beau Billington after work, but maybe it has everything to do with it, right? Particularly when I tell people like the magic in the fractional space is finding the intersection of like passion, background, and domain expertise. Like to me, that's where you should focus your time and your effort. But I love how you kind of brought in some outside influence and some outside elements to kind of round it all out. And I may employ people to do the same. I think that's a could be a missed opportunity by many.
yeah, I think also that's where the world is taking us, right? So I think no longer, and again, my whole experience has been in Silicon Valley tech, where I think people were just used to like climbing that ladder and going from one company to another, knowing that they could be easily employed and have three or four offers, that they can choose from. The world has shifted. It's with AI, with the age of efficiency, you know, whether maybe it's with the administration, I don't know what's going on, but but I think people can no longer count on being employed by just one company, having a good steady paycheck. I think that people really need to think long and hard about like, the career direction when like job W-2 jobs are just no longer guaranteed. So I'm a big fan of fractional work. I'm a big fan of portfolio careers. I've made it work for me. I don't know that everybody has had it figured out. And I think that we're all still figuring it out together, right? But it is, I think, the future. I think that this is where a lot of people will end up taking their careers now that the world has changed around them.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I 100% agree. I started my business 8 years ago. I was just super early. I've seen
Mhm.
space change more in the last 2 years than any time in the previous six.
Me
So I
too.
rise, which is great. And I agree too about the whole W-2 1099 dynamic. I'll talk to folks often. They're like kicking the tires on fractional. Is it for me? Is it not? And honestly, I probably dissuade 70% of the people I talk to because it's not for everybody.
I agree.
I hear a lot of folks that are like, well, it doesn't seem safe. W2 seems safer. And I'm just like, in 2025, like, is it really safer? I don't know if it is, to be honest with you. I mean, I personally would rather have my destiny in my own hands, but maybe I'm insane. But you kind of alluded to like the fractional being on the rise, and so like, what is your vision, or what is your thoughts around kind of the fractional use case, right? So is it typically a bridge until full-time resource is needed? Um, is it good for kind of one-off, maybe more project-based type of work? What are your thoughts in general about kind of when to leverage one, when it's appropriate, maybe when it's not?
Hmm. It's a really good question. So, yeah, I take a lot of inspiration from Elena Verna. I don't know if you know her, Beau, but she's her brand is an expert in product-led growth, and she has done a lot of different interesting things. So again, she used to be an operator. She was, VP at SurveyMonkey and a bunch of other places leading um, growth teams at those companies, and then ended up going the fractional route. Ended up going even the interim route, and I can share the differences between fractional and interim. And then has gone back to like full-time operating roles when it was an opportunity she couldn't say no to. And then she would go back into fractional interim when that stint was over. And then now she's at Lovable as like their head of growth because Lovable being one of the fastest, hottest growing AI companies, like, when they came calling, she was like, okay, I'm ready to leave. So I I take inspiration by that in that like it's not a forever choice. You can decide that you might want to do fractional for a few years and then go back into a full-time operating role. I would say though that for me, my path is probably just fractional. I don't know that I would go back to a full-time role ever again. Although never say never, because you never know. Maybe if Lovable comes calling, um, or another hot AI startup. But really, I really do love the variety of work. I was kind of committed to it. I started about 3 years ago before it was hot. I recruited a business partner, and the thesis was that I just being 52, didn't know if I had the energy for yet another startup, grind it out, 80, 100 hour weeks and putting all my eggs in one basket. I really enjoyed the diversity of work. I really wanted to work with multiple founders. And I also felt like I was now ready to be my own boss. I recruited a business partner, and we could talk about that if you were interested on like what it's like to have a partnership. But I recruited a business partner, and I had always said to us, let's give it a year before making any decisions, like before quitting too soon, right? Like let's give it a year. And it, 2.5, we got lucky. We got three founders who said yes right away to us to wanting to work with us. And 2.5 years later, we're going strong. And both of us have more work than we can handle. And so I don't see us changing things up anytime soon. So that's my path. But I do think that like everybody's path is going to look different. So some people might start fractional in order to find the thing that they loved and go full time again. Others might just be fractional and this is what it is, and I love it, and I don't really want to ever do anything else. Like, and that sounds like a little bit more like you and me, Bo. But I think that everybody has a personal choice to make in this matter, and whatever decision you make now, it's not a forever decision, most likely. Things you never know how life throws you opportunities and sometimes curveballs, and 5, 10 years it might look very different. So,
And I think too, if COVID was good for anything, I feel like it did kind of change the dynamic on like the employee-employer relationship and how most folks view work in general. And it definitely can provide some flexibility to folks, allow them to dabble in other things. Again, going back to kind of the comment you mentioned about maybe it's a portfolio of life, right? Um,
mm,
but that can be really attractive. And then to your point too, like, contract to hire can be an option, fractional can be an option, interim can be an option. There's a myriad of different options out there.
right.
But I also think too, like the perception on perspective on people kind of maybe job jumping or going from fractional to interim back to full time. I feel like that perception, a negative one at least, has kind of changed a little bit in the last couple
Mm.
of years. And I'm hearing less people talk about job jumping because ultimately it's all about kind of finding your North Star, what works for you at that time, right? If you have
That's
you
right.
want to spend a little bit more time at home and not the 80 to 100 hours at the company. So, and then in regards to like the company's perspective, like my personal opinion on fractional is that it fractional executives should typically kind of work themselves out of a job, right? So it's
Mm.
an embedded leader that is with them indefinitely. Maybe it is for a year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years as they're scaling. But generally, I am from the school of thought that they should come in, maximize value, and then eventually kind of move on to the next. Otherwise, you're just kind of working at a lifestyle business, which is totally fine. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with?
Mm.
Disagree?
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. So I'll say that, like, like one of the founders I'm working with now, he was like, I want to work with you forever, and and I really love him. I might work with him forever. Another founder that I'm working with now, he was like, as soon as we raise our next round, I want you to join me full time. And I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't think, let's have that conversation at the right time. But but really, I do think that like if it's a great match and they continue to need you, like why not just continue that engagement for a long time? I find that my scope changes as as the founder grows, the company needs grow. I end up like taking on lots of different varied needs or projects and so I just don't know if it needs to be full time. I don't need to, that you need to fire yourself out of a job. I would say the difference, of what I see between sort of fractional versus like full time versus interim. So fractional, it's a fraction of your time. I mean, that's how I define fractional. It's a fraction of your time. I'm not full time with you, and all my founders know I'm working with multiple founders. So that's fractional. I don't think that it needs to be short term, because to me that's interim, right? So interim is short term. I'm going to work for you for a year, but with the goal of after that year, or somewhere before the conclusion of that year, I'm going to help you find my replacement. So that's an interim. And then, of course, full time is they want to lock you in with thinking about nothing else, for their company for as long as it's a mutually beneficial, good fit. And that's, what you would call like a W-2 employee. So yes, I have a slightly different view, and mostly because it's been my own personal experience where like uh not just for me, but for my business partner, like our founders, as long as they have money, they never want to stop working with us. So it's easy, so I don't have to fill the pipeline. And sorry, Bo, you might be on mute, or I can't hear what you were saying.
I would say, but you also have a very, very high ceiling, right? Because you've also done so many different things. So maybe as the founder is growing, so can your work. But
I think that's right. I think that's right. You nailed it.
also too, it's up to the company. And every growth is different, and every
Yeah.
trajectory and engagement is different for that matter. So you mentioned, having a partner, which is great, and I've seen a lot of budding partnerships kind of pop up in the fractional space. Talk to me about kind of how you do that. I mean, is your partner kind of like, their skill set starts where maybe yours ends or you're weaker, or do you focus on the COO stuff and maybe they focus on something entirely different? Like, talk to
Yeah.
me about what
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's a good question. No, so my business partner is also a fractional COO. So that's, I've branded myself fractional COO, and he has as well. He worked for me at my last startup as my head of strategy, head of operations, and chief of staff. And so we've always had sort of that inherent like trust, and knew that we could work together well. When I decided about 3 years ago that I wanted to go the fractional route, I thought long and hard and realized that I didn't want to go and do it by myself because I just knew that consulting could be lonely, and I really wanted a thought partner in this. And as I was thinking about who it could be, to me it was very clear there could only be one person. It had to be Garrett, and because we had such a history together and we worked so well together. So I spent about 4 months recruiting him, he was not yet ready to like hang up his operating hat to join me. And it is because he is younger than me and he felt like he was still in his career building years. But when he did finally say yes, and as I mentioned, we were lucky we got three founders to say yes, working right away. It was like off to the races. Now, what I think is really great about Garrett is that we do have complementary skill sets. So he is actually way stronger than I am in strategy and operations. I'm, I have done product for 16 years, although I don't do product anymore, but I'm really, really good at like growth. I'm good at community building. I'm good at helping founders with fundraising, but I, of course, can also do strategy and operations. And so it depends on the nature of the engagement. When we talk to founders, we usually are both on the call, and we'll really assess like what their biggest needs and pain points are. And depending on who it is, like it will naturally lead to either one partner or the other. And then in terms of our business itself, like, yeah, I guess I would say that I'm the one that has the star power, the brand, the network, and so most everything comes into me first, and then I'll pull Garrett into the calls. He's really good at writing the proposals and closing. Like he's way smarter and a better communicator and better at many things than me. But he also is the one that runs our business. So he does all of the payroll, invoicing, taxes, all the things that just make me want to just
Same. Yeah.
want to scream. But yeah, so it's a perfect partnership, and inherent in that is just a lot of trust, a lot of trust. So.
Yeah, so you mentioned trust a couple of times, and I wrote that down. And I think any good partnership is of course create trust is the most critical component there. And it's kind of like a marriage, you know what I mean? Like far too many people I think rush into it. It's great that you knew him for so long, and then you had to recruit him, played hard to get right for 4 months, but
He
now.
played so hard to get.
Well, just a couple more questions, we'll get you out of here. I really appreciate your time, Ha. So, as you look at the fractional space, we kind of going back to a little bit of our earlier conversation. I mean, do you see this as kind of, a bit of a kind of a one-off or a fad, or do you think it's here to stay and just going to kind of increase with importance and interest?
Yeah, I think it's here to stay. So I'll remind everybody that it started as a cottage industry, right? Mostly with like fractional CFOs. I think that that was kind of, where it started. Sometimes fractional CMOs do, but just the idea is that at these early stage companies, you just don't need a full-time person, but you still, for especially in the finance world, you still need somebody to help close the books or put together the P&Ls or the forecasting model, help you with the fundraise process and putting together the due diligence materials, the data room, things like that. And so the fractional CFOs could work with five or six companies at a time because they just didn't need somebody full time until they were much further along. I would say now I'm seeing fractional across every single function. Fractional HR makes a lot of sense. Fractional COO, fractional CPO, fractional CTO. I don't think it's a fad. I think that the thesis is still the same, which is at the earliest stages, that there's just some roles where founders just don't need them full time, but they need help in certain areas, and it could be part time. And in fact, if they brought in the right fractional person who's seasoned and can hit the ground running, like they might actually get even more value from bringing on that person at less cost, because they wouldn't normally be able to hire somebody of this caliber so early. So I think certainly the supply is on the market now. The demand will be there and will continue to increase the more that founders are educated that it actually might be the smartest thing that they've ever done for their business is to hire really, really seasoned fractional leaders who've, been there, done that, seen the playbook and been part of the rodeo, multiple times over, and then has sort of this bigger 30,000 foot lens of like what is actually going on in the market, right? Like sometimes when you're all in one company, you only sort of see what's going on within your own company as opposed to sort of this broader lens. So I'm a big fan. I think it's here to stay. I hope that that prediction ends up becoming true.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. All the way around. For me, it was kind of going out of the finance function, then marketing, then tech, and now it's pretty prevalent in operations as well as sales, chief revenue officers. I'd say
Hmm.
finance are where we see the most demand currently, followed
Hmm.
by the other skill sets. And also too with the baby boomers retiring and some of the different generations kind of assuming control. I would be very, very surprised if we don't see a further push into the fractional space because it just makes sense. And I agree with you as well. I mean, if you're a sub 15 million ARR tech company, you need a full-time CFO. I think there's better places to spend money, but you could certainly benefit from somebody who's very, very senior, been around the block, who can help you in a fraction of the time and probably move some levers even better than a full-time resource. Um,
Hmm.
you kind of mentioned how fractional execs could be beneficial to founding companies. What piece of advice would you give to founders in particular if they're considering using a fractional executive within their business?
Yeah, I would say there's probably a few pieces of advice, but one thing that just comes to mind is that um, that you do have to work with them a little bit differently than your full-time execs, right? I mean, they are a fraction of your time, and so I think uh, they won't be able to join every single one of your recurring team meetings. They're probably going to set stronger boundaries than what you feel comfortable with your full-time execs, and so just understand that you're not hiring somebody full-time. You're hiring somebody fractionally, but they should be able to deliver as much ROI, if not more, than a full-time executive on your team. And so if they're not doing that, I mean, it's it's perfect. It's easy to say goodbye, and cut ways, and that's why I do think that hiring fractionally is the least amount of risk that you could possibly take. Hiring somebody full time, it's going to take you, I promise you, 6 months to land somebody in the door. And then in 3 or 4 months, or even sooner, you might realize, gosh, they're not the right person. And it's going to be very, very expensive to exit them. So I would say, my second piece of advice is if you haven't tried it, you 100% should go and, try hiring your first executive. Start by talking to your founder friends and ask them who they've been working with and who they'd recommend, right? I mean, fractional, um, it pains me to say it is still very much a referral business.
Totally.
And so find somebody comes highly vetted and you'll be pleasantly surprised at like how they can change the trajectory of your business.
Yeah, I agree. You could also start small. I mean, we typically try to lock up at least a day at time plus, but there's many fractional
Mhm.
executives who are like, yeah, fine, five hours a week, whatever. Get in, get to know each other, then you can ramp up as needed. But I feel like you hit the nail on the head. The beauty of them is that the ramp time is reduced significantly, particularly if you find somebody with like domain expertise. They can,
Hmm.
there's no politics, right? The ramp to being productive is very, very shortened, and
Yeah,
you kind of walk them out the
yeah,
door, the right
yeah.
fit.
Oh, I have one more actually. Recommendation is I think it's critical for the CEO, the founder CEO, to like also communicate with the rest of the team and especially the executives, the role that this person's coming in to play. Sometimes without that lack of clarity and alignment, like it can be a little bit messy in the beginning. So I would say, kind of communicate out like uh what you brought this person in for, like when they will be available, how they will be engaging with the rest of the team, etc. I think setting those clear expectations internally up front will be really helpful
Totally.
across for everybody, for
Yeah,
everybody.
rules of engagement. I mean, and also too on the candidate side, but this is the last question for you, Ha, and I really appreciate your time. So, same advice, but for a fractional executive, what would you tell somebody who's about to kind of hang a shingle and go out into the marketplace themselves to become a fractional exec, much like you did 3 years ago?
Yeah, well, I would say, the number one question I always get is how do you land business? So, and I'm sure that's the number one question that you get. So I would say that number one, um, you are pivoting right into not just being great at your function, what you do, but like learning how to sell. And so it's a skill, and part of selling is building your network. So if you don't already have a network, you need to start building your network and allowing it to compound over time. Um, but I think part of like being good at selling is in every conversation, no matter who you're talking to, remind everybody like what you do, what's the one or two superpowers you have, that like they should remember if they talk to a founder or anybody who could use your help, like these are the keywords. And then, maybe think about closing every conversation saying like, hey, who do you know who I should talk to, who might be helpful to me in my work. But I think that just basic pieces of advice. It feels so straightforward, and yet, like I talk to so many people who just aren't doing the basic fundamentals in order to build a successful fractional business. So,
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm a big proponent of like, knowing your ICP cold, your ideal client profile. From that, you can build out kind of your value proposition and start selling. But it is about a network. And I've also found that with AI, and everybody talks about AI, whatever, but as it pertains to like cold outreach and emails, everybody's inundated. And so the new superpower is the referral network. And that really, which is
yep.
I've had to double down and learn how to be a better referrer and better at asking for referrals myself, because that's the only way, I don't want to say only way, but that's the best way to rise above all the noise that's out there in the market, particularly in the fractional space, which is becoming a little bit more crowded. And I think that's another reason why, nailing your ICP and having your profile tight and your value prop is critical. So where can people, learn more about you?
Okay, so I always say LinkedIn has all the information to learn about me. So Ha Nguyen, Nguyen. On LinkedIn, I'm the managing partner of Next Step Consulting and Advisory. Next Step. You can go visit our website, nextstepfwd.com. I also have my own personal website. It's pokergirl.co.
Okay.
.co
Loosen that.
because I used to be a big time poker player. And then that's where you'll also find interviews I've done, my reading and writing and um, blog posts and other things. So,
Man, like there's more to you there here. I'm learning more and more.
oh,
Well,
I could go on, but that's part two in a year. So you can invite me back, hopefully.
I really appreciate the time. Sincerely, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Beau. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it. Bye.